Hello friends, this is New Rush Ward channel. I'm Yuri Gimmelfarb, and today we have a politician, a representative of the movement for the independence of Siberia. A man who promotes the idea of the United States of Siberia, Stanislav Sizlov. Hello, Stanislav. Hello Yuri, nice to meet you. Stanislav, I would like to discuss with you the interview Garry Kasparov gave to Duty. Already, as they say, portrayed it out and portrayed, again and again. Mostly, they are portraying that Kasparov accused Alexei of not leading people from Sakharov Avenue to the Kremlin in 2011, that he betrayed the protest and doomed the opposition to defeat. There is a 6-minute video of Garry Kasparov's speech at that rally. Do not be lazy, friends, look, and find where Garry Kasparov called to go to the Kremlin himself, and when you don't find it, explain why. He didn't lead anyone to the Kremlin and thus doomed the opposition to defeat, but that is not the point. There is one interesting point in Kasparov's interview. He believes that with the collapse of the Russian Federation, China will strengthen. But this really surprised me. This is not the age of the great geographical discoveries, when annexing territory strengthened the state. For example, is a country with an area of only 20,000 square kilometers. Yet they supply their vegetables to half the globe, and Israeli hike has become a parable to the world. And also Japan, Switzerland, I could list a lot. The annexation of new territories does not strengthen the state, and in some cases, weakens it. And Taiwan is not an example. Here, there is a direct Chinese interest in Taiwan, and it is not only political. I will remind you that Taiwan is the producer of 60% of the microchips on the planet Earth, and that this technology has moved to China, and the West does not want to allow it, nor Taiwan itself. That's clear to us. Disintegration of Russia, how will exactly China's strengthen? At the moment, Russia is a vassal of China. If you like, other countries will be in China's sphere of interest. How this will strengthen China, I don't understand. Can you explain it to me? I don't understand how this will strengthen China either. The simple fact is that China has long been a kind of, I don't know, horror story for all Russians. Especially with regard to Siberia. When they talk about Siberia, everyone immediately starts saying, you have China right near you. I've been wrong about that myself. I already told you once that in 2012 I believed that the disintegration of Russia could start with China occupying the territory up to the Urals in 1 or 2 days. It's true, there have been articles like that. There was even one of those articles I saw, there were many of them, that's even how China's military plans were described. How can China move armies and take over everything down to the Urals, almost in 1 week? It is true, and I hasten to agree with you, and yours truly has sinned with such ideas. Somehow, on second thought, I decided it was nonsense. When there were a lot of conversations about this very thing, including there's an example. My business. My workers had to travel to the Far East on a business trip, and they would then come back through all the large cities. Visited every city, and when they arrived, they had, of course, their eyes, so to speak, wide open with horror. They told me things like, they said, "Do you know what's going on over there?" What's going on? Well, they say there's a lot of Chinese there, but that was, when? It's been almost 11 years now, or even 12 years ago. They said that Russian men are degenerating. The Russian women are happy to marry a Chinese man because Chinese do not overuse alcohol, work much and well, and so on. And at that time all the talk on this subject was very active. But now, everything that is happening, we have already discussed with you that the volume of China's sales to Russia, that is, the volume of trade is even less than 3%. Well, it's really nothing. I spoke about this in my speech at the Free Peoples of Post-Russia Forum in Washington, D.C., just about the fact that trade turnover is very low indeed, and my personal opinion is that China will not be interested in losing everything for the purpose of such a turnover or even to increase it in some way unrealistic, for example, in two doubles. Why lose colossal markets like Europe and America? So, therefore, most likely, well, in our world now, what can I say? Money is one of the fundamental priorities. Here Russia actually had no money like that, as if it could be considered normal money. So one of the reasons is that when Russia's aggression on Ukraine started, that is, let's say, the money was directed to the wrong thing, and it was the wrong money and so on. That's a different subject. In fact, I will not develop this subject now. In principle, I don't think it makes sense for China to lose these colossal markets and its heavy dependence on Europe and America. For one thing, he can certainly show us that as they are interested in Taiwan. Maybe he wants to be given some part of the production of microchips, these technologies, and he would redraw these technologies, as is usually the case, and create something similar and start to develop as well. That's an option. It could be, yes. Because one of the speakers at our forum said, I think China's threat to Taiwan is very serious. But if we turn to logic, why is it serious? It's very illogical. My opinion is that it is probably illogical, because the volumes of trade volumes that China has with developed countries, well, even losing them for the sake of Taiwan makes no logical sense to China. But they may well bargain for new production facilities to be located there, manipulating such horror stories about Taiwan. As far as Taiwan is concerned, I would probably disagree with you, with all due respect, but the fact is that there is also a political question. Let's not forget what Taiwan is. This is Kuomintang China, and in fact that's where Chiang Kai-shek's government fled to, and they consider themselves Chinese too. Only they think they are the right Chinese. But Beijing thinks the right Chinese are us. But we are still a united state, so politically this question is important to them. The other thing is that I will agree with you on another point, that it is unlikely that China would risk exactly a military adventure, a direct confrontation with the United States. But back to the question, let's look at the problem differently, please attention. We have been talking to you and my other guests. For the past year, the process of Russia's disintegration, which Vladimir Putin set in motion, has become irreversible.
Распада России, который запустил Владимир Путин, он стал необратимым. Он был обратимым до 24 февраля. Сейчас все.
It was reversible until February 24th, but now that's it. And just a few days ago I specifically did a stream showing why this has become an irreversible process. The
Запад
West,
сейчас как раз он
understanding
хочет,
this, wants to make this process at a
понимая
minimum
это,
controllable.
хочет
To
сделать хотя бы контролируемым этот процесс. Чтобы это
to
все не
keep it all
сваливалось
from
в хаос.
falling into chaos,
Но
but the
процесс
process has
уже
already really
действительно
become
приобрел
irreversible.
необратимый
I have
характер.
been discussing
Я
this topic
долго
for
на
a
эту
long
тему
time,
рассуждал,
and
скажу
I will
сейчас
say,
ретроспективно,
now
что
only in
хотя бы
summary,
потому,
that
что
at least
региональным
because it is
элитам
already
уже
becoming
становится
unprofitable
невыгодно
for
идти
regional
в одной
elites to go
связке с
along with the
Кремлем.
Kremlin. Plus,
Плюс
the catalyst is decades, if
катализатором
not even
является
many centuries of
накопившиеся
accumulated resentments.
многодесятилетние, если не многовековые обиды. У каждого они свои. Ну ладно.
Each region has
Но
its
в
own.
данной
In
ситуации
this
вот мне не
situation,
совсем
it is not
понятно,
quite
почему
clear
такой
to me
опытный
why Garry
политик и
Kasparov,
умнейший
such an
человек Гарри
experienced
Зинович,
politician and
он
intelligent person, gave
поддался
into
на
emotion,
эмоции. Ведь
because
одной из
one of the
черт
traits of
политика
a
это
politician
отсутствие
is the
именно
absence
эмоций.
of emotion.
Этот процесс
This
уже
process cannot
не
be
повернуть
reversed.
вспять, и
It
его
really
действительно
needs to
его
be
надо
controlled.
контролировать. И
All the
все
talk about the
разговоры о
beautiful Russia of the
прекрасной России
future is
будущего,
about the
это
same
примерно то же
as,
самое, что
well,
ну
let us
давайте мы
dream that a
помечтаем,
wizard will
что
come in a blue
прилетит волшебник
helicopter
в
and give
Лондон
us $1
такой-то
million
и
for
бесплатно
free.
нам подарит по $1 000 000. Ну,
Да.
понимаете, это же...
Maybe he just
Ну,
has that
видите,
view
можно
of the
просто
situation.
у него просто
Again,
такой
with
взгляд на
regard
эту
to China,
ситуацию. Опять же,
I
что
may have
касается
left a
Китая,
little
вот я
more
еще
to be
немножко, может быть, не
said.
договорил.
I wanted to
Я хотел
say that
сказать о том,
as
что вот
far
сколько
as
я
I
видел
have
китайцев
seen the
здесь, например, в
Chinese
Европе,
here,
да,
for
в общем-то,
example,
даже и в
in
России,
Europe,
кого знал
and in
китайцев, ну,
Russia,
все, кто
those
ехал в
who
Китай,
have
они
left
не хотят
China,
возвращаться
they
назад.
don't
То есть
want to go back.
это серьезный
This
показатель
is a
того, что,
serious
значит,
indicator
они
that
не хотят,
means
чтобы
they
Китай
don't
приходил
want
за ними.
China to come after
То
them.
есть
I
у
certainly
меня,
have
конечно,
people
есть
I
люди,
know
которые со
who
мной спорят,
dispute
да, то
with
есть они
me.
говорят, нет, ты не прав,
They
потому что не
say,
понимаешь логику,
no, you
стратегию
are
китайцев
wrong,
и так далее.
because
Но
you
вот
don't
я вижу
understand
то,
the
что и здесь,
logic,
например,
the
где мы сейчас тоже
strategy
видим
of the
много китайцев,
Chinese,
никто
so
не
on
хочет
and so on.
возвращаться в Китай.
But what I
Некоторые же
see is
ехать туда
that
не
we
стремятся.
also have many
А вот
Chinese
если мы
living
будем смотреть,
here,
чтобы
but
Китай
none of
пришел,
them
например,
want to
просто куда-то
return to
там в Россию,
China.
например, где их
Some of
много
them do not
проживает,
even
и
want to
они
go
стали
there.
снова на
And
территории
if you
Китая
look
жить,
at
я думаю,
China
им это вообще
coming,
очень даже
for
интересно. Я не думаю,
example,
что они
to
будут здесь
Russia, for
Китай
example, where there are a lot
поддерживать
of
в этом плане.
Chinese
Что
people, and they
касается
would live on Chinese
мнению
territory
уважаемого
again,
господина
I think
Каспарова, я
they would
думаю, что,
not
может
be
быть, просто он
interested in
видит
it at all.
это, ну,
I
еще
don't
находясь
think
под
every
определенным
one of them
впечатлением
will
прошлого,
support
потому что,
China in this. As for the
видите,
opinion
мы
of
на
the
самом деле, вот
respected
я
Mr.
посмотрел
Kasparov,
его
I
интервью с
think that
удовольствием, с
maybe
большим
he sees
удовольствием
it
посмотрел
still,
интервью,
being under a
выяснилось, что, оказывается,
specific
ну, ехали в одно
impression
и то
of
же
the
время
past.
практически.
I
Да,
watched
может быть,
his
разница
interview
несколько
with
месяцев.
great pleasure.
Ну, естественно,
It turned out that
у
we
каждого
left
из нас
at
наверняка
practically the
остались
same
какие-то
time,
впечатления, какие-то,
maybe a few
может быть,
months apart.
парадигмы, которые
Naturally,
до сих пор
each
у
of
нас
us still has some
на нами там
impressions,
как-то
some
частично давлеют.
paradigms that
Ну и,
still
может быть, у него
partially
эта
weigh
парадигма
on
именно в
us,
отношении Китая
and
осталась.
maybe he has this
Это, в
paradigm
общем-то,
just
нет
in
ничего
relation
такого
to China. In
плохого, как бы,
general,
ну,
there is nothing wrong with
просто
it,
необходимы
or
какие-то
just
моменты,
needs some
которые, может быть, он
moments that
увидит со
maybe he
временем и
sees it that
поменяются.
way for
Что
himself now,
касается второго
maybe
момента, что
in
касается
time
вот
he will change his opinion.
прекрасной
As for
России
the second
будущего,
point,
это
as
уже
for the beautiful
вопрос
Russia of the
очень
future,
такой
this is a
глобальный,
global
потому что
question.
у меня
Because
тут тоже была
I
небольшая
also
статья по
had a
поводу того,
short
что почему
article
я не
on
верю
why
в
I don't
прекрасную Россию
believe in this
будущего,
beautiful Russia of the
потому
future.
что, по сути, это
Because, in
сохранится та же
principle,
самая
it will
империя.
remain the same
И
empire.
на сегодняшний
As
день,
of
ну, я просто
today,
не вижу
I do
вариантов
not see any options
того,
for how
как
this
этим
mechanism can
механизмом
be
можно
managed,
управлять,
but in
но
a
уже
different,
другим,
not Putin's,
иным, не
but a
путинским, а
democratic way.
демократическим путем.
Let's
Если,
say that
допустим,
once
когда-то,
upon a
может быть, в
time,
советское время она
maybe
еще
during
как-то
the
там
Soviet
работала, да, и как-то
times,
там
it
управлялась
still somehow
вся эта
worked
огромная
there,
территория.
and how this
Но
whole
тогда,
large
извините меня, тогда
territory was
и время
managed
было
there.
другое, и даже,
But then,
если так посмотреть, может
sorry,
быть, даже и
it was a
свобод каких-то
different
было
time
больше,
then.
чем
If you look at
сейчас.
it that way,
Сейчас же
there may even
уже
have been more
это,
freedoms than
ну,
there
вот
are
этот вот
now.
жестокий диктат, и кто
And
его
now there is
заменит,
this brutal
кто изменит эту
dictator,
всю
and who will
структуру.
replace him,
Ведь
who will change this
вся
whole
структура
structure.
управления, вся
Because the
система, она
whole
подвержена
management
такой мощной
structure,
коррупции,
the whole
а как
system,
мы
it's
прекрасно
subject
видим,
to such
все
powerful
администрации
corruption. And
региональные,
as
так
we can see
называемые, ну я сейчас
perfectly,
называю их
all our so-called regional
административные элиты, да,
administrations,
они, в
well,
общем-то, в
I
любой
now
момент,
call them
действительно, как вы и
administrative
говорили, они
elite.
могут
They, in
перерисоваться и
general,
уже
then at
поменять
any
там
time
стереть красный
really,
цвет
as you
флага
said,
и
they
быстренько
can
себе взять
redraw,
бело-синий, и все, и
erase the
готово,
red
они вроде
color
как уже
from
новые, да.
flag and quickly
Тем не
get
менее
yourself a
фактически
white
ничего
and
не
blue
изменится.
flag. and then they're kind as new. But in fact nothing will change in order to somehow restructure this colossal mechanism. I'm not even talking about breaking it. Maybe there is no point in breaking, but restructuring. I just don't see any ways that could change all this very quickly. Because the same people will remain, there is unlikely to be support from the West in this case. Hardly anyone will listen to the West and say, "We are smart ourselves," as is always usual in Russia. Same rake, just a different color, with different maybe forms of fingers, well, and so on. So basically, in principle, it's going to be the same thing.
Абсолютно с вами согласен, Станислав. Я больше того
Absolutely
скажу,
agree with you,
что
Stanislav.
Россия — это
I will say
империя.
moreover that Russia is an
Любая
empire.
империя
Any
может
empire can
держаться
only be
только
held
на
on
штыках.
bayonets. The Soviet
Советский
Union was
Союз
held on
держался на
bayonets.
штыках.
As
Как
soon as,
только
during
эти
perestroika, these
штыки во время
bayonets
перестройки
weakened.
ослабли, в
In
86 году, если мне
1986,
не
if
изменяет
my
память,
memory
был
is correct,
27-й
there was the
съезд
27th
КПСС.
Congress of the
86-м,
CPSU.
да.
And in
А в
1988, there was the
88
first
году
Congress of
был
People's Deputy,
первый
at
съезд
which,
народных
what did
депутатов, о
Vytautas
котором
Landsbergis
что
say?
заявил Витаутас Ландсбергис? О выходе из состава Советского Союза. И понеслась, как
He declared his
говорится,
secession
коса по
from the
ипподрому.
Soviet Union and,
Как
as they
только
say, the
или
go-tren on the
штыки,
racetrack.
условно
Once
говоря,
the empire's
затупились,
bayonets were blunted,
или в
or lost the will.
желание.
Therefore,
Поэтому
in order to
для
hold the
того,
beautiful
чтобы
Russia of the
удерживать
future,
прекрасную
put at
Россию
least a
будущего,
president or make
да
a parliament
поставьте
of
вы
symbiosis and
президентов
clones of
и
Anton
сделайте
Chekhov,
парламент
Mahatma
из
Gandhi, Václav
симбиозов
Havel,
и клонов
Lilia
Антон
Akhadzakova.
Павловича Чехова, Махатмы Ганди, Вацлава Гавела, Лии Меджидовны Ахеджаковой. То есть я взял совершенно прекрасных и
I took,
интеллигентнейших людей.
well,
И
perfectly
Андрея
fine
Дмитриевича
intelligent
Сахарова.
people, Andrei
Вы в
Sakharov,
любом
I forgot to
случае
say.
придете
Either
к
way you
штыкам
will come to
или к
bayonets,
распаду.
or disintegration.
Все.
That's
И не
it,
каля
the
комедия.
comedy is
А что
over.
касается
As for
Китая,
China,
еще
another small
один
point, I
маленький
respect
момент.
the numbers.
Я уважаю цифры. За пределами Поднебесной проживает 60
There are
миллионов
60 million
китайцев.
Chinese living
В
outside of
китайском
China.
языке есть
In
такое
Chinese,
слово
there is a word
«хуацяо».
called huaqiao.
Это этнические
These are ethnic
китайцы,
Chinese living
проживающие за
abroad.
рубежом.
So
Ну
China
и
jumped
что?
in to
Китай
occupy the
бросился
Philippines?
оккупировать
Oh
Филиппины,
please.
Индонезию? Помилуйте.
United States, Europe too?
Помилуйте. У Китая другая
China
стратегия.
has a different
И вот в этом
strategy.
отношении
And in this
я
respect, I
согласен
agree
с
with Alexander Kushner's
очень метким
very clear
определением
definition. A
Александра
wonderful
Кушнаря,
man, author and
замечательный
host of the A New
человек,
Sidrit
автор и
channel.
ведущий канала
So he
Ньюсейдер,
called it
как
the
он
locust
назвал,
strategy.
стратегия саранчи. Они приезжают в страну, живут
They
анклавами,
come into the country, live in enclaves of Chinatowns, doesn't integrate into the local society.
И вот,
And you are absolutely
но
right, they
вы
don't want to go
правильно
back to
абсолютно
China.
сказали, возвращаться в Поднебесную. Они не хотят.
А
Note,
Вот чем...
sorry to break it to you, just a second, Chinatowns, I mean, they've been around for more than 100 years.
Абсолютно верно.
Absolutely right. That's right.
Правильно.
But nothing really changed. Nobody came running and started occupying these new territories through the Chinatowns and so on. They've been living in enclaves forever. Russians also live, for example, and Ukrainians, as they say. Do you speak English? You know, we don't go
Мы в
there.
Америку не ходим. Ну, когда,
We don't go
это
to
же не
America.
анекдот, когда
Yes,
на
but it's not a
Брайтоне
joke when an American
приходит
comes to a Russian
американец
market in
в
Brighton and the
русский
sales
магазин,
clerk says,
ему
Sonia, go
продавщица
serve the
говорит, Соня,
foreigner,
иди
and it's
обслужи
not a
иностранца.
joke.
Но это не
It's really
анекдот.
true.
Это на самом деле так.
Only we also have a great number of Russians coming here, well, because this is a visa-free country. So the same thing, probably about 200,000 came. Well, of course, a lot of people don't learn the language, I mean, Basically everyone is shocked. They
В
say
этом
now we're
плане я вам
creating
могу
a Russian
сказать, что и в
enclave.
Израиле
But
похожая
in this
картина. Я
regard,
вот
I
живу
can
в
tell you
городе
that in
Бат-Ям.
Israel the picture is
Бат-Ям,
similar.
это
I live in
приграничный
the city
пригород
of
Тель-Авива.
Basham. It is a
От
South Tel Aviv
центра
suburb.
Бат-Яма до
From the
центра
center of
Тель-Авива
Basham
ездили
to the
30
center
минут
of
на
Tel Aviv is a
автобусе. Так вот
30-minute
я вам
bus trip.
скажу, что Бат-Ям
So,
называют
I will tell
русской
you that
столицей
Basham is
Израиля.
called the Russian capital
Я
of
вот лично
Israel.
встречал
I have
людей, которые
personally
здесь
met
живут
people
по
who have lived here
20-30
for
лет, они
20 and
языка
30
не знают.
years, and they don't know the
Им
language.
это не надо.
They don't need it.
Потому что
In a
на 130
population of
тысяч населения
130,000,
80%
80%
это
are Russian speakers.
русскоговорящие.
It's true.
Это
That's
действительно
true.
так.
Nevertheless,
Это
in
правда.
this case with the Chinese,
Да, но тем не
yes,
менее,
it's an Eastern
В этом
mentality.
плане
I'm
с
not disputing that.
китайцами, да, это восточный менталитет, я не спорю. Но, собственно говоря,
But actually about the
усиления,
strengthening of China, I don't see a single
не
factor that
вижу
the
ни
collapse
одного
of Russia will
фактора,
lead to the
что
strengthening
распад
of
России
China.
приведет к усилению Китая.
я
I
тоже
don't
не
see it
вижу. То есть
either. There's no
никаких
suggestion of
каких-то
that.
предпосылок для
Strengthening
этого
even.
нет.
Well, okay, if
Усиление
there was a
даже, ну ладно,
territorial
хорошо, если
occupation.
бы
But
был
then again,
захват
we're talking
территории. Но
about a
опять же, мы говорим
territorial
о том, что
occupation.
захвата
Then by
территории
and
это, в общем-то,
large,
не
there
будет.
won't be.
Для этого тоже
There
нет
are no
никаких
objective conditions
объективных
either. And there are no
предпосылок и
permissions, so to
разрешений, так
speak,
скажем,
that the
которые бы
world
мировое
community could
сообщество
allow
могло
China to
позволить, чтобы
occupy
Китай
something
что-то там
there.
захватил.
On the
Напротив,
opposite, now,
вот
for
сейчас,
example,
например,
it may be
проще, может
easier.
быть, как мы
As we
уже
already
знаем, да,
know, some
территории
territories have
некоторые
been
были сданы,
surrendered.
у меня,
I
кстати,
don't
данных,
have
к
the
сожалению, нету
information,
сейчас, но, может, они у вас
unfortunately.
есть. Вот территории,
Well,
которые
maybe you have information on
там
areas
сданы в
that have been
аренду
rented to
Китаю там
China
на
for
50
50
или на
or
сколько,
90
на 90
years?
лет, да, то есть,
Yes,
пожалуйста.
I
То
mean,
есть, ну,
please.
кто это делает?
But
Это
who
же
is doing
делает
it?
там
It is not independent
независимые
new
новые
states that are doing
государства.
it
Это
there.
делает
Today's current
нынешняя
Putin
путинская
government is
власть.
doing this.
Она это
Правильно.
дает.
Naturally,
Естественно,
it
им
is more
выгодно работать
profitable
с
for
ними,
China to
чем с
work with them
какими-то
than with
новыми
any new
структурами.
structures.
Пардон. Хорошо.
Oh, sorry.
Была
Well, there was a
единая
united
Россия,
and inseparable
появились
Russia, and the
Соединенные Штаты
United
Сибири,
States of
на
Siberia
территории
came into
которой
being.
есть
With
споры,
territory, they
там
have agreements
разные
on different dates.
даты от 49,
From 49 to,
по-моему, до
I think,
70
up to
лет в
70
аренду.
years on rent.
Что
What will
Пекин
Beijing
сделает,
doeth?
если,
Let's say, it
скажем так, он
arranges
будет
an agreement
договариваться
not with
не с
Moscow,
Москвой, а
but
с
with
условным
Yakutsk,
Якутском или с условным Петропавловск-Камчатским
or with
или с кем, да с
Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky,
кем
or
угодно.
with
Он
anyone.
просто-напросто
Xi Jinping will just meet
встретится
with the
Си
new head of
Цзиньпинь
state and
с
just say,
главой нового
well, let's
государства
redraw the
и
contract.
просто скажет,
And
ну
there's
давайте
nowhere for him to
заключим
go.
договор.
And
А
there's
куда им
nowhere for them to
одеваться?
go.
Одеваться им некуда. Они будут перезаключать договор.
Нет, это
И
понятно.
They will be
Это
remaking
для
the
я имею в
contract.
виду, это
Китая
понятно,
It's
что
no
это
worse or better for
ничего
them.
ни хуже, ни лучше. Что до этого там жили
Before that,
китайцы
the Chinese
на
lived there
территориях
on
опережающего
territories of
развития.
advanced
Что потом
development,
они будут
that they
жить?
will live there later.
Объясните вы мне,
Explain to
я
me.
реально не
I
понимаю,
really
а что
don't
поменяется?
understand. What will
А
change?
от того, что,
From the fact
допустим,
that, let's say, Sakha, Yakutia will be a separate independent
независимым
state.
государством,
Well, they will
будут они
complete their
достраивать
power
свою
of
силу Сибири.
Siberia.
Теперь
Now
это
it will
будет
be
их.
theirs.
Что
What will
поменяется?
change?
Ну, кстати, тут
By
уже
the
другой
way,
немножко
here's
момент.
a
Вот
little
недавно
bit of a point.
по новостям
The Russian
российским
news
прошла
recently
информация
reported that Russia
о
has
том,
seriously
что
upped its platinum
Россия,
exports to
значит,
China.
очень сильно
As it
увеличила объем
sounds,
экспорта
yes,
платины в
they
Китай.
have upped their
Ну,
platinum
как это звучит,
exports.
да? Увеличили
Imagine,
экспорт платины.
it's
Что это всем
platinum,
платина? Не
not
там, не
some
что-то там,
silver,
не серебро,
platinum
платина
after
все-таки.
all. And
А
then there
потом,
was a
значит,
little
небольшое
correction
разъяснение, что,
that,
оказывается, это
as
не
it
платина, а
turns out,
платиновая руда.
it's not real platinum, but
То есть вы
platinum
почувствуете
ore.
разницу, да?
Feel the difference.
То
Для
же самое, да, вы
справки,
увеличили...
дорогие зрители, для того, чтобы
For
из
your
платиновой
information,
руды
dear viewers,
сделать,
in order to make
условно
a
говоря,
platinum
платиновый
bracelet
браслет,
from
но
platinum
я не
ore,
могу его
but I
показать, у
can't
меня
show
его
it.
нет.
I don't have
Но
it.
не важно.
Yes, but
Так
never
вот,
mind. This is
это
modern high
современные
technology, which Russia does not
высокие
have.
технологии, которыми Россия не обладает.
Exactly
Да,
like
вот
that.
именно
You can
так.
also
Также можно
export
и
kimberlite ore
кимберлитовую
and
руду
say that
возить
we are
тоже, в
selling
общем-то, потому
diamonds.
что мы продаем
What are
алмазы.
we talking about?
Понимаете? То
And
есть
that's what
о
they're
чем
telling
речь?
us. Yes, we're
Именно
selling. You said
о
about the
том, что вот это вот
Siberian power,
рассказывают.
but
Да,
we
мы
know
продаем. И
very
вот
well
я
that
почему
this is
сказал, вот
actually
вы
a very
сказали про
cabal
Силу
project. A
Сибири.
very cabal
Ну,
project for Russia.
мы прекрасно
That is the
знаем, что
price
это
of
на
this
самом деле
gas is
очень
practically
глобальный,
zero.
очень
There
глобальный
is
для
no
России
profit there, and so on.
проект. То есть
But
там
again, this is
цена
an image
этого
project.
газа
Everyone
нулевая,
is told that we are friends with China. I have said before, if someone is already saying we are friends with China, I believe that only a foolish person among politicians can say that they are friends with China. If someone says, we are friends with China, but China will never be friends with anyone. China will always exclusively pursue its policies in its own self-interest, will smile, no matter whether Xi Jinping or anyone else is there. Well, as it usually happens, yes, they smiled and so on, but China's policy it will never change in the interest of someone else. Well, in principle, this is normal for any country. In general, the question is that it is not normal now for Russia. If Russia recognizes that China is pursuing its policy, it says, and we mean that this is the basis of our friendship. This is just a complete deception. Accordingly, as far as the future is concerned, I do not think that in this case the heads of the new states, for example, of SOA or Asia, will agree to sell the same raw materials to China in the form we have just spoken. I mean, it would probably be normal. I mean, maybe this contract will last there, some initial time, some transition period of 1 or 2 years. But I think it would be more logical to immediately offer the Chinese, dear guys, let's do this, you go and get, let's build, let's say, an enrichment plant here. And you will invest it. It is definitely necessary. Let me remind you, so that it would be profitable for Saka, so that it would be profitable for Asia, Siberia and so on. We ask, will you develop so that we send you the ground by rail cars, and you dig out everything that is there? You said that this is a priority direction. Am I confused? Yes, absolutely right. Which countries will be your first choice for agreements? What did you say to me? South Korea, Japan, am I confused? From countries in Asia? Yes, naturally. That's it. Where's the Chinese strengthening? I am completely puzzled. China is strengthening now because it has a vassal to whom we ship ore, as Stanislav just said. And they will ship us recycled products. There's your answer. Yes, they probably won't supply products in the volume of raw materials they will be processing. That is, this export will go to other countries, and Russia will again receive from it, like everything else, within 3%. Because well, there is simply no one, there is simply nowhere and there is no need to send it. I doubt that China's strengthening is possible, especially in case of formation of new independent states. Well, nevertheless, such opinions exist, and well, not only among Mr. Kasparov, but in general, let's say, among many analysts. I have also said that one of the respected speakers at the forum, he said that he believes that the dangers posed by China are very real and serious. Well, again, it's someone's personal opinion, you understand? I mean, I'm not going to discuss it now and so on. I will remind you of one more question, one more theme that sounded in our interviews with you. Do you remember my question about the fact that there will be investments in highways? Siberia is mostly permafrost and seismic conditions, and very few countries have such technologies. By the way, China is not one of them. That includes Japan. What did you say to me? You answered me that you are the first place we will do this. Now friends, think about it. In China occupies these territories, Yes, and why the hell would it want these empty lands with no infrastructure that it would have to invest itself? Of course, this is also generally not beneficial for China. It will depend on what kind of strategy they can build. There is a lot of talk, I think, about our northern territories and so on and so forth. But well, it's kind of characteristic of an empire. Yes, we see that any empire, just like the Chinese Empire, in fact, they also like to say that somewhere there are territories that when you belong to them, and would like to take them back. But you are absolutely right that it is one thing to work for other people's money, say, to build roads somewhere in Europe or in Moscow. I was in Montenegro just now. Look, the Chinese have built the roads there, it's a miracle. I wanted to post pictures comparing the Chinese, Montenegrin Autobahn. The bridges and tunnels are magnificent. And for comparison, the roads of the richest region of Siberia. Do you remember, I sent you a map, it just didn't make it into the program, somehow it didn't work out. On that map you can clearly see that it starts almost from Omsk. Although not even from Omsk, from the small town of Ishin, there is only one way between Siberia and the Urals. There are no other normal roads to Siberia anymore. Okay, the second one goes through Kazakhstan, but sorry, that's already Kazakhstan. Another country, that's two borders and two customs. This is entering and leaving another country. And also, given what is happening in Russia, we have discussed this, by the way, whether they will send tanks and so on. You know, with the fall of the regime in Moscow, Kazakhstan, because they're not stupid people too, they're not going to deal with losers. So they won't let anyone through, because they don't need it. So there is only one road, please, one Siberian road, which goes all the way to Omsk and beyond. Next to it there is a railroad line. Of course, opponents may say to me, well, you know, during World War II, when the Nazi troops were moving toward Moscow, the so-called Siberian divisions were transferred along this railroad line. To be exact, they were not Siberian divisions, but Far Eastern divisions. Well, excuse me, that was certainly a different time. There were other means of intelligence, information and so on and so forth. It was still a different time. Maybe even the organization at that time in the Stalinist regime was much tougher than it is now in Russia. Russia has big problems with logistics in general. I got a little bit off the subject. Well, here is one road. What is it? How is it at all? Does China need it? Do they need to have just one road to Europe if he has other routes, like sea routes and some more? Yes, and completing the topic already, there is one last argument that if China takes over the Far East, it gets access to the Arctic Ocean. The question is, why does he need it? Guys, can you think about seaports? Anderma, Dixon, Dixie, Vivek? Do you have any idea what these seaports are? They operate 3 months of the year. And some of them 2 months a year. The seaport of Vivek works 2 months a year. And why does China need it? Through them during navigation they bring their fuel and food for the winter. I just know it well, because for 3 years, from 1985 to 1988 my wife and I wintered at the polar station Yugursky Shar, 40 kilometers from Anderma. I know this system so well, I've seen it all before my eyes. Navigation is in July. And by the end of August, the ice is coming in. You understand, there are actually only 2 months, June and July. The second half of June, July and half of August for the ships to pass and unload. That's why it was not economically viable even at that time.
Вы понимаете, что это фактически есть 2 месяца
That's why after the
июнь-июль,
collapse of the Soviet
ну,
Union,
вторая половина
300
июня,
people were left of the
и по
5,000-strong
июньке
Anderma
половина августа для
population.
того, чтобы
Because
просто
the
сюда
prices were so high,
прошли
I'm sorry,
и
a pack of cigarettes
разгрузились.
would cost
Вот
like a cast
почему
iron bridge.
тогда это было
Guys, what's
экономически
about?
невыгодно. Вот почему после
Again,
распада
if we look
Советского
at the
Союза
Northern Territories,
от
turn to Canada or
5000
let's say
Андерман
Alaska. These
осталось
are highly developed
300
countries in the
человек.
world.
А потому что
Yes,
там
and
такие
their
были
northern
цены, объясните
territories
меня,
are not
это
in such strong
пачка
development
сигарет
as.
будет стоить
It is
$1
clear that they are
или
better
5
developed than
штук.
in Russia. It is clear,
Ну,
the
опять же, мы
countries are
посмотрим, если
richer
на
and the
северной
people
территории,
live
ну
in
давайте
better
обратимся к
conditions
Канаде и,
compared to
допустим, к
Russia.
Аляске. Мы же тоже
But
видим
even
прекрасно
there is
развитые
still
страны
no
мира, да,
such
ну вот
thing. It's
северные
special,
территории,
so
они
that we
тоже
can
не
say
находятся
that
в такой
China will
диковой
suddenly
например,
come and
как
it
вот
really
и,
needs a
ну,
way out
естественно, они
to
очень
this
развиты, это
Arctic
понятно,
Ocean.
потому что страны
Who
богаче,
thinks
там народ
China
живет,
dreams of
там
getting
другие условия и
access
так
to
далее.
the
Но я
Arctic
говорю про то,
Ocean?
что все равно
Even
там
for
нет чего-то
developed
там из
countries,
ряда вон
these are
выходящего
difficult
такого
territories to
обустроенного, да, чтобы
develop,
мы
and they
могли
can be
говорить о том,
developed
что
only in
вдруг придет
conditions of
Китай,
special
им очень нужен
economic
выход этому
necessity and
ледовитому океану.
benefit, if
Вот
there
прямо
is
вот
any.
возьми,
And if
поможет
there is
там,
no
сделай
such
выход к
benefit,
ледовитому
why it
океану, и
to
он об этом
do?
мечтает. Я к тому, что это для всех, это
So
даже
to
для
sum up,
развитых стран
when here
тяжелые
is the
территории
thesis
для
that if Russia
освоения.
collapses,
И
it will lead to a
осваивать их можно
stronger
только в
China.
условиях там, ну, какой-то там особой экономической необходимости и выгоды, если она будет
First of
таковой.
all, not if, but when
А
Russia
если ее нет,
collapses, because
зачем?
once again, this process is
Поэтому,
irreversible.
подводя черту,
And
я хочу
secondly, it
сказать,
will not
что
lead to the
когда вот
strengthening of China.
тезис о том, что
So there you
если
go.
Россия развалится, это приведет
I
к
absolutely agree with
усилению
you. I
Китая. Ну,
don't see
во-первых, не
any
если, а
reason for
когда
this to be a
Россия
strengthening
развалится.
of China
Потому что,
either.
еще раз говорю,
Stanislav,
это
thank you very
процесс
much for an
стал
interesting
необратимым.
conversation.
И
Friends, I
второе,
remind you
к
that you have heard the
усилению
point of view of
Китая
Stanislav
это не
Suslov,
приведет.
a politician and representative
Второе,
of the
да.
Siberian
Абсолютно согласен с
independence
этим, да.
movement. But I also
Не вижу
remind you
никаких
of another
предпосылок для
thing,
того,
the
чтобы это было усиление
conclusions are
Китая.
yours alone to draw.
Станислав, спасибо
Subscribe to
вам
the New Rush
огромнейшее
Word
за
channel. Be sure to
интереснейшую
subscribe to our
беседу.
channel
Друзья,
on
я напоминаю,
Telegram.
вы слышали точку зрения политика, представителя движения за независимость Сибири Станислава Суслова. Но я напоминаю другое. Выводы делать только вам. Подписывайтесь на канал New Rush World, обязательно подпишитесь на телеграм-канал и до встречи.